Hey man, welcome back to the channel. Last time we kind of laid the foundation. If you want to grow as a man of God, it takes grace and grit. And I kind of invited you in on this journey that I found myself on the last few months. I looked at my own life and I realized that change needed to happen, right? But I wasn't sure, as I thought about it, I wasn't sure how lasting transformation really happened. I had experienced change in my life, in different seasons of my life, but never experienced this like lasting change. It would all kind of fizzle out. And I began to ask the question, like, was it all on me to do the work and put in the work, or did I just need to step back and let the Spirit do all the work? Did I rely on grace, right? The divine power of the Spirit that's at work in all of us? Or did I rely on my own grit, on my own work, right? And that's this response of a man who's willing to do the hard work of transformation. And I found that it's not one or the other. It's actually both. We need both. But here's the tension for us. And that I've found, what does it look like? Like, how does this play out for us in real life? How does grace and grit show up in the everyday things of life? How does grace and grit show up when your marriage is on the rocks, when your mind is scattered, when your body's just out of shape, as I found myself, when your emotions are all over the place? And so that's where I want to go today, because I just want to dig a little deeper into this, because if we're going to become the man that God intended, we can't settle for head knowledge, right? I'm guilty of this. I watch a lot of YouTube, watch a lot of sermons and podcasts, but what we need habits, practices, right? To accomplish real change. So let's break it down. And I want to start where I think it matters the most, and that's your soul, okay? And so if we look at grace and grit, grace is what gives you your identity. It tells you, you're not your performance, right? You're not your past. You're not your failures. Instead, it tells you you are chosen, loved, forgiven, called for a purpose. But grit, okay? That's actually how we respond to grace. That's what shows up at 5:30 a.m. when your alarm goes off and your body screams to stay in bed, like mine did this morning. And grit is when you open the Word anyway, when you open God's Word anyways. Grit's when you pray even when it just feels like it's hitting the ceiling and coming back and hitting you in the head. Grit is when you confess your sin instead of hiding. Grit is choosing presence over passivity. The Apostle Paul says this. I want to remind. We looked at this in the first video, but I want to remind us one more time. He says in 1 Corinthians 15:10, he says, "By the grace of God I am what I am. Yet not I, but the grace of God that was within me." But look, right before that, again, he says, I worked harder than any of them. Did you catch that again? Grace empowered him, right? And then grit activated him. And so we're never going to drift into a place of spiritual strength. It's just not going to happen. And if you've ever, thought about this, you know that's true. We need grace is what's going to carry us. Grace gives us our identity. And then we need grit, our own grit, to train us, right? And so let's talk about your body, how this applies to your body, your physical, okay? Now, I know this is where a lot of men check out, right? We don't want to be told that we're out of shape, overweight, but I think a lot of people want to separate the body from the spiritual life. But in Romans 12:1, it says to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. Okay? So if you look there, grace says your body has a purpose, right? It's a vessel, it's a temple, it's a tool. God gave you your body. He knit you together just as you are, on purpose, for a purpose. But grit is the response, right? Grit is how you honor your body. And what that means practically for us, it means saying no to laziness, which is hard. No to gluttony, which is difficult, right? We want to eat. No to the couch when your family needs your presence. It's no to pornography. It means building rhythms, right? Sleep. I have terrible sleep patterns. Trying to get better. Movement. Trying to get better at moving. Nutrition. Trying to get better at eating better. Setting boundaries up. Okay? And this isn't, you don't need to become a fitness influencer, but you do need to stop outsourcing your health to convenience and excuses. And so grit says, I'm going to take responsibility for the body God has entrusted to me. So grace gives you the why, right? You were bought with a price. You were created for a purpose. Grit gives you the how. You show up every day to steward what you've been given. All right? And now let's look at mental, right? I want to see if we can shift your mind, okay? Because we live in a culture of distraction. You're watching this on YouTube, right? There's constant noise. There's endless scrollings, clickbait, notifications, right? And what it's resulted in is like mental clutter. And so grace, as regards to your mental health and your mental life, grace gives you clarity, right? It reminds you of what matters, cuts through the noise, cuts through the fog of it all, and really anchors you in truth. Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, right? That's grace. It renews you. It renews your mind. But grit is our responsibility. It's choosing what you feed your mind with. It's turning off what drains you. It's reading when you'd rather just veg out in front of a TV or doom scroll. It's focus when everything around you screams for your attention. So men with grit guard their minds. They don't let garbage in and expect like good things to come out. Grit means filtering your input, podcasts, media, entertainment, conversations, even who you follow online, right? Can add to the noise, add to the mental clutter. And so grace renews, grit rewires. Yeah? And then lastly, let's talk about the emotional. And how we kind of own our emotions. Now, I know emotional health is not a popular topic, especially with men. In fact, probably most of us find it uncomfortable to talk about our emotions. We weren't raised to talk about our feelings. We were raised to kind of most of us suppress our feelings. Others were ruled by them, right? I that's where I find myself. I'm ruled a lot of times by my emotions. But grace says your emotions are not the enemy. Okay? If you look at Jesus, the model man, when he was here on earth, what do we see? We see Jesus wept, right? He was brought to tears by the death of his friend Lazarus. Jesus in the temple gets angry, right? Flips tables. Jesus got angry. Jesus had compassion. He was emotionally alive, Jesus was. He wasn't emotionally numb. He didn't suppress all of his emotions. So grace says you don't have to fake strength. You don't have to hide your wounds. You're allowed you're actually encouraged to bring your whole heart to God. But grit says you take responsibility for your inner world, right? And we like to play the blame game when it comes to our emotions. And so grit means you stop blaming your parents, stop blaming your boss, your wife, your past, all that. And you take some responsibility and you start asking hard questions. why am I angry? Like, why am I having this outburst of anger? What pain, right, am I avoiding? What fear is driving me? And then you pursue healing. You go to counseling if you need. You speak honestly with your wife or other men. And so grace gives you this permission to feel, right? And then grit gives you the power to actually deal with your emotions and navigate your emotions, not just suppress them. So to kind of wrap up, what does grace and grit just practically look like? Okay, it looks like a man who walks in the power of the Spirit, but still wakes up every morning, puts on his boots, and goes to work. Now, not necessarily literally to work. You might not wear boots to work, but just that figurative, you're putting on your boots, going to work, doing work on yourself. Looks like a man who knows he's loved by God, right? But then yet still leads himself with discipline out of that love. It looks like a man who embraces his weakness, but still rises every day with courage to face the day and to do the work, put in the work to change. So this is the tension, right? But this is the way. And this isn't a call to perfection, right? But it is a call to progress. And that progress, moving in that direction, is going to take both grace and grit. So here's an action step for today. Okay, I want you to audit your life. I did this not too long ago, and it was really good. I just sat down, and I got brutally honest with myself, and I looked at those 4 areas. First, the spiritual. Am I feeding my soul? What am I feeding my soul with daily? Physical. Am I caring for my body with intention that God's given me? Mental. Am I training my mind in truth? And then emotional. Am I taking ownership of my inner world? And so pick one, just one, okay? And this week, take one grace-filled, grit-fueled step forward. That is how we become the men God intended. So I'm going to see you on the next one. Love you guys.